iOS 16.2 is an extremely important update with more than 35 new features and changes. So in this video, you're going to see those new features, and we're also going to discuss the performance, battery life, and if you should update or not. The size of this update will vary greatly depending on the version that you are coming from. It can be anywhere from under 1 gigabyte all the way up to over 5 gigabytes. And there is a new modem firmware update, so if you had any issues with connectivity on previous versions, those could be resolved thanks to this firmware update. All right, so now what's new here in iOS 16.2? And the first thing is for the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max users, and this is a feature that we should have had from the very beginning, and that has to do with the always on display. So take a look at this. I have my always on display right now. Do you notice anything different? You should, and that's because we don't have a wallpaper or notifications showing up. So that is the big new feature here in 16.2 for the 14 Pro devices. So if you go into your settings, go to display and brightness, and then down to the always on display, you will see that we have new toggles in here now. So we have show wallpaper and show notifications. So if I wanted to show my wallpaper but not my notifications, I can do that. I have the ability to do one or the other, or of course you can do both, but I do recommend turning off the wallpaper just so you can save a little bit more battery life in the long run. And perhaps the most fun feature in iOS 16.2, we now get Apple Music Sing, which is essentially karaoke mode for Apple Music, and it is much better than you think. So first off, this does not work for every single song, but you will know when it works for that song if you tap on the lyrics and you see this little microphone button right here, and it actually emulates the volume indicator, the volume HUD on the left side. So basically you have this little volume right here, and you can move that up or down, and what that does is it controls the original artist's vocals. So you can turn them all the way up for the normal song, or you can turn them down all the way down to the very lowest, which it will not completely eliminate those vocals, but it will turn them down a lot. That way you are able to sing without reducing the sound of the instrumental. It's actually done much better than I even imagined. And if you want to turn that off at any time, you can just simply tap on that and then tap it again to enable that, and you will see the little sing little glyph right there. It kind of animates as well when you turn that on. We also now have real-time lyrics, so you can see that the lyrics highlight on a word-by-word basis instead of highlighting the entire sentence. And you'll also notice that these lyrics are separated, and that's because if there are multiple artists on a song, it will separate their lyrics on different sides of the screen, which is really cool. Now, if you do not have the adjustable vocals right here, we can change the volume of the vocals. That's because either A, you're on a song that does not support this, or you're on a device that does not support this. That's right, this feature is only available for A13 and newer devices. So these devices listed to the right are the only ones compatible with this new feature. Now, staying in the music application, you can see we do have some new animations as well. So when you tap on any of the playback buttons, you will see this little animation. And if it looks familiar, that's because it was the animation that we had in the control center. So before in the control center on previous versions of iOS, we did have that same animation, but now it has made its way to the now playing screen in the music application, and it works for all these playback buttons. There's also a new look to the lossless button that's on the now playing screen. And last thing in the music application, if we go onto a single page or an album page, you will see that the buttons play, shuffle, the description underneath, and also the genre, the date, and the Dolby Atmos lossless, all of that is less opaque here on 16.2 compared to previous versions. Now, the next feature is a pretty important one, and that is advanced data protection for iCloud. So if you go into your settings and go to your iCloud and then tap on the iCloud section, and then if you go all the way down close to the bottom, you will see a new section here that says advanced data protection. Now, if you tap on that, you will see a breakdown of what this is. And essentially what this is end-to-end encryption for all of your data in iCloud backups. So there were certain things that were encrypted before, but now with 16.2, everything in your backups will be fully encrypted. And we know that this is legit when the FBI is literally saying that they are deeply concerned with this move by Apple. Now, this is not enabled by default, and the reason for that is because you do have to set up a recovery key or a recovery method to get your data back in case you were to lose it. Because again, Apple's not going to have access to it, so they can't give it back to you if you lose it. So if you tap on turn on advanced data protection, it will think for a second, and you get a splash screen that says you will be responsible for your data recovery. Tap on set up account recovery. And from here, you need to add a recovery contact, which I think will be the best way to do it for most people. All you need to do is add somebody that you trust right here, and they will be able to get your account back, your data back, if you are in that situation where you needed to recover it. Or you can also do a recovery key. And this is a 28 character code that you need to keep in a safe place and never lose. And you're going to use this key to recover your data if you lose access to your account. So advanced data protection, a massive feature here in iOS 16.2 that I'm sure many people are going to talk about for a while. Now, Apple did also mention that there are a couple more security changes coming to iOS in 2023. So they talked about this in a press release. And the first one is iMessage contact key verification. And this allows iMessage users to, quote, further verify that they are messaging only with the people they intend. And then the biggest one for me is that Apple is also going to add security keys, which will allow you to use a hardware key like a Yubico or a Google Titan to have a more secure way of logging in to your Apple ID account. So now you'll be able to log in to your Apple account using a hardware key. So if you are into crypto, you know that is the way to go for security. And now that is coming to the iPhone in 2023. Now, while we're on the subject of security and privacy, the next change is going to ruffle a few feathers, and that is related to AirDrop. So if we go to our control center and haptic press on our platter right here and tap on our AirDrop, you will notice that before it said everyone. That's been like that forever. Ever since the iPhone came out with this feature, we've seen AirDrop available for everyone. But now in 16.2, that changes to everyone for 10 minutes. So when you turn this on, it's going to revert back to contacts only after 10 minutes. And this feature was first implemented in China last month, but now it has rolled out globally. And this change is in response to the ongoing trend of sending explicit or just unwanted photos to unsuspecting guests in airports or public places. And I will say that although this is a very understandable change, it does kind of take away from the fun of airdropping strangers funny memes and images at theme parks and places like that. So maybe sometime in the future there will be a toggle to re-enable everyone all the time, but it may have to be, off by default. This update also adds live activities to the TV application. So now if you go to a game in the TV application, like for example, I have the Heat game right here. If we simply tap on follow, you will see that up in the dynamic island for the 14 Pro series. And on all other devices, you will see that here on the lock screen. So now when you lock your phone, you'll still be able to keep an eye on the score of that game. Now also, if you go into the settings for the TV application and then go down to live activities, you will see that we have a brand new toggle here for more frequent updates. And this allows more frequent updates that let you see more real-time information. And I found that this is important for sports scores. So I did see a difference in this. It was more close to real time. The score is more close to real time versus when this was turned off, but just keep in mind it could drain your battery faster as mentioned here in the settings. Also in the TV application, you can see on the Watch Now tab, we now have trailers and little advertisements at the top, whereas before we did not have that. We just had the up next. So you can kind of go and scroll through some of these different ads for Apple TV shows and movies. iOS 16.2 also introduces a brand new default application called Freeform. So after you update, you will notice a new icon on your lock screen that looks a little bit like this. And this application is essentially just a big digital canvas application that allows for live collaboration with iPhone, iPad, and Mac users. You can collaborate together in real time. So obviously I'm not the best at this. I'm just drawing animals and arrows and things like that, but it is pretty cool. You have a lot of different options down here. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time showing this, but you can do a lot here. And it is great if you want to work with coworkers on something, especially if you're in the creative field. I can see this being pretty useful. And one of the coolest things about this application is that you can actually collaborate with another person while on a FaceTime call. So you can invoke this while in a FaceTime call, and you can kind of see what the other person is doing in real time while also talking to them and seeing their face. Now, a big new feature for those in India is that 5G has officially rolled out with iOS 16.2. So iPhones sold in India have always always had the hardware capability of using 5G from the start, but since they did not have the infrastructure over in India, it was disabled via software until now. So now with iOS 16.2, 5G is available for all compatible iPhones in India. This update also includes a new home application architecture upgrade, which is going to improve the performance and fully implement the new Matter standard. Now keep in mind, your HomePods also need to be updated and running 16.2 for this to work and actually notice a difference. I did actually notice a difference after updating. My HomePods are more responsive, my handoff is much quicker, everything just seems to run a lot faster and smoother here after this update with 16.2. We also finally get external monitor support for M1 and M2 iPad Pros when using Stage Manager. So this was a delayed feature that is now available with iPadOS 16.2. And if you're a big fan of shortcuts like I am, we now have new shortcut actions for customizing the lock screen. So now instead of only changing the default lock screen wallpaper, you can now change it for the lock screen that you're currently on. And this is a huge change if you use this shortcut to get a new wallpaper daily, like I've made videos on here on the channel. And if you search for wallpapers in the shortcuts application, you will see on previous versions we only had set wallpaper, but now in 16.2 we have set wallpaper photo, which is a little bit different. We also have switch between wallpapers and get wallpaper. So those are all three new scripting actions here in iOS 16.2, which make a massive difference, again, if you like to change your wallpaper via shortcuts. Also, if you search for battery, you can see that now in iOS 16.2, we have get battery status instead of just getting the battery level, which is just the battery percentage. Now you have an option here. You can get the battery percentage, you can see if the battery is charging or is connected to a charger, which is a great action to have if you are running shortcuts that are reliant on the battery status. And speaking of the wallpaper and lock screen, we have a few changes on the lock screen right here. So first off, you can see when you have an evening summary, when you have a notification summary set up, before on previous versions of iOS, you had to tap on the number and then the X right there and then clear. It was like a three-step process. But now with 16.2, you can just simply slide over on it, swipe it over and clear it, just like it's a normal notification. We also have two brand new widgets here on 16.2, so one for sleep and one for medications. And if you tap to add a widget, you will see we have sleep and we have two different types. So we have data and schedule and also sleep. You can view your most recent sleep session, including your sleep stages. As you can see, I can see my sleep stages right there, which is very useful. And then we do have medications, which is actually under health. So it will be health right here. And you can see you have two different sizes for your medication widgets. And while we're in this customize screen, we also have another change when we tap on these three dots. So now when we tap on the three dots, when we go to customize, we have a new option here for show photo in library. And this is extremely useful for a couple of different reasons. Number one, so you can find that photo in your library again if you need to reference that, or if you needed to add it to a album, or most importantly, if you needed to share it. If somebody asks for your wallpaper, you can simply tap on that, you can customize that, and you will be able to share it very easily just by tapping on those three dots and showing it in library, because I know these photos can sometimes get lost in the shuffle. You'll also notice a change with the notification center and how it acts when you hide it. So for example, if I hide the notification center notifications right here on both devices and I go out and then I go back into the notification center, they stay hidden on previous versions, but now in iOS 16.2, the notifications show up automatically without having to pull up from the bottom again. And if you're in a focus mode on previous versions, you just simply had to tap on that focus mode and you would be able to change it, but now you can no longer tap it. You have to tap and hold on that focus mode to change it, which I think is a much better change because I accidentally tapped on that multiple times on previous versions of iOS. So now you just have to do a slight little hold right there and it pulls up the focus mode so you can turn it off or change your focus mode. We also get a nice improvement to search and messages, and it allows you to now find photos based on their contents. Like if you search for Tesla, for example, it's going to pull up photos where it can detect a Tesla. So if you search for Tesla, car, cat, tiger, whatever you search for that there's potentially a photo of that was sent in a message, you'll now be able to find that by simply typing out the context of that photo. In Safari, if you tap on the two A's in the address bar, you will see that we have a new option for show IP address or hide IP address. So I'm going to tap on continue right here. Now if it reloads and we tap on the two A's again, I can hide IP address. And this of course just enables or disables the iCloud private relay feature. We have a new setting for Siri, so if we go into our settings and go to Siri and search, and then to Siri responses, you can see under spoken responses, we have a new option for prefer silent responses. And it says Siri will respond silently except when you appear to be driving or using headphones with the screen off. Now going back to the settings, if we go to general, software update, automatic updates, you want to make sure that security responses and system files is turned on. And the reason for that is because Apple is going to finally start pushing out some of these security response updates starting with iOS 16.2. And I've talked about this before, but what this does is it essentially just downloads and installs a patch for a security vulnerability that Apple has detected that does not necessarily require a full-on update. So Apple doesn't have to wait for a full-on update to be out of beta testing. They can push this right away when they find a fix, which is extremely nice. We also have a couple of changes to Game Center. So you can see we have a new Game Center activity widget. So you could add this to your lock screen or your home screen to see the latest activity from your friends. And we also have Share Play support in Game Center for multiplayer games, so you can play with people that you're on a FaceTime call with. In the weather application, you can now see the weather forecast by the minute instead of by the hour. You could also see this for pretty much any of the charts in here. So if you go ahead onto one of these charts, this one is for the temperature, the feels like temperature. But if you go ahead over right here, if you just slide your finger and move across this table, you will notice that you can now see that change by the minute instead of by the hour like on previous versions of iOS 16. You'll also notice in some cities that there is a news section where you can see local news from that city. In the Notes application, if you have a shared note and you're collaborating with another person, you can now see the participants' cursors in Notes to see live indicators. So you can basically see where their cursor is as they're typing, just like you can like in a Google Doc. And also, if you unintentionally trigger emergency SOS and call emergency services, you will now get a report to Apple little section where you can report to Apple how that was unintentionally triggered. Now, as far as bug fixes go, we do also have a few bug fixes here with iOS 16.2. Pretty much the two main bugs that I had with iOS 16 and 16.1 have actually been fixed here with 16.2, and that is the biggest reason I cannot wait to update my main phone. So number one, the stutter when swiping to go home from a third-party application. So if you're in any application and you went home, there would be a slight stutter pretty much almost every single time I went home from a third-party application. I had stutter, but now with 16.2, that stutter is non-existent. It has been fixed. And then we also have a fix for the focus mode wallpaper bug. So I talked about this a lot in my Apple Weekly episode here on this channel, but basically when a focus mode would turn on automatically and then I would turn it off manually, it would change my lock screen and my home screen wallpapers to all black. And even if I changed wallpapers, that one would stay all black as well. The only way to fix it was to reboot or to manually set a new wallpaper. But now that has been fixed here in 16.2. We also have a fix for crash detection. So now you're no longer going to call emergency services by accident if you go on a roller coaster or if you go skiing. So this of course was a major issue on previous versions. There were several articles written about this and that has finally been addressed. And then we also have a fix for notes not properly syncing to iCloud after updates are made. Now, as far as the performance goes for iOS 16.2, you might notice a minor bump in performance, especially if you had some of the bugs that I just mentioned. Those ones were driving me crazy. So just having those two fixed alone makes 16.2 feel so much better, so much smoother and faster than 16.1 or 16.1.2. So, the Geekbench scores here show that we do have a minor improvement in performance over iOS 16.1 and 16.1.2. So you might as well, go ahead and update if you are on the fence about it. If you're having a really laggy experience on a previous version of iOS, 16.2 very well could fix that. Now, as far as the battery life goes, I'm not sure how much you guys have been paying attention to my battery throughout this video, but battery life is actually pretty solid here on iOS 16.2. I think it is better than the previous versions of iOS 16. So if you have been having issues with battery life, this update could also fix that for you. And I said this in my iOS 16.1 video, and I'm going to say it again. Do not expect iOS 15 level battery life so early into the iOS 16 lifecycle. We're only on the second major point update of iOS 16. The battery life will improve over time. Just give it time. But I will say 16.2 is definitely better than previous versions of iOS 16 in terms of battery life. All right, so now let's answer the big question. Should you update to iOS 16.2? And I say absolutely. I mean, for multiple reasons. For fun reasons, like with the Apple Music, the karaoke features, for important reasons like end-to-end encryption, for your iCloud backups. You know, there are so many reasons. The lag fixes, all of that. There are so many reasons, I think, to update to iOS 16.2, especially if you have an A13 or newer device. That's an iPhone 11 or newer device. But even if you don't have that, I mean, I think 16.2 is a very worthy update. And then finally, let's talk about what to expect next from Apple in terms of software. So we should see iOS 16.3 begin beta testing very soon. However, the next public release is likely not coming until sometime in probably mid to late January. Probably late January would be the earliest we would see, maybe say a 16.2.1. But as far as iOS 16.3, which is going to be the next major iOS update, don't expect that to come until, late February at the earliest. But of course, if you guys want to stay updated on all things Apple and iOS, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I do always talk about the upcoming releases. I cover those in my Apple Weekly episode, which is a roundup series I do here on my channel every single Saturday, and I talk about all of this stuff on a weekly basis. But anyways, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video about iOS 16.2. If you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for what I just said, the Apple Weekly series, and also just to stay as up to date as possible about everything related to Apple. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.